For the third straight year, Staten Island K through 12 science teachers participated in a free recycling training workshop designed to equip them to share the science behind recycling with their students. The training is based upon the recycling curriculum developed by Jason Learning for ISRI, which is short for the Institute of Scrap Recycling Industries. This year's workshop, presented by Jason Learning, was held on Thursday, June 8th at the Grand Oaks Country Club. The training session was introduced by New York City Department of Sanitation Commissioner Catherine Garcia, Staten Island Borough President James Otto, and Pratt Industries Recycling Division President Miles Cohen. Here is Sanitation Commissioner Catherine Garcia.
So I want to thank Miles and the Borough President, obviously, for having me come and talk about the importance of recycling and how we view it in terms of its connection to education and why that's so important and why we are investing time and money in making sure that you have the tools to create my new consumers in the future who will, help educate their parents sometimes on what goes in what bin or whatever. All of you on Staten Island and all the Staten Island schools have not only metal, glass, and plastic, paper, but also organics collection on the island. And so there are a couple of things in terms of all of these different pieces of the puzzle that I think really help make it so that you can use them in your curriculum and connect everything together. I've seen also not only looking at materials management, what's the difference between ferrous and non-ferrous metal? How do you do the percentages? There's tons of math programs around this. We actually did a contest for this past year with public schools, and actually a District 75 school ended up, well, I shouldn't say that yet because we haven't announced it, but one for this year, and it was really using recycling in all sorts of different parts of their program, whether that was math and science, but also then even connecting it into the art program so that they were engaging with their students across a ton of platforms. And we want to make sure that we're supporting that and working in partnership with the folks here. But a lot of the kids that I meet, at least, are super interested in the environment. I was at a school actually up in Harlem, and he's like, he's a pretty little kid. He goes, "Why are you screwing up the planet?" And I'm like, well, we're really working hard to make sure that we aren't screwing up the planet for you, and making sure that you have an environment that is safe and healthy as you grow up. I was like, but we need your help. We need to make sure that we are doing the recycling, that we are using less in general, or that we are reusing. And that is the first priority, like what can be repurposed before we put it into the waste stream. We have a new website called Donate NYC, which is connecting businesses to get rid of stuff with people who have stuff and may want stuff. We also just did some work with the Mayor's Office of Film and Entertainment, and so many of the productions that are happening in New York City, the filming, Madam Secretary, Sesame Street, are all going green. And they actually have been saving money. And so there's like an opportunity to do case studies around that. But what we spend a lot of time also looking at is what are we throwing away? What are people on Staten Island throwing away? And I have to say Staten Island is a little better than that number that you put up there. Your diversion rate is about 20% right now, and growing. And we do have less newsprint in our waste stream, a lot less, a lot more cardboard. But also, interestingly, a lot of cardboard moving into the commercial side because people have things delivered to their offices. Particularly if you're in a single family home and don't have a doorman, like I don't, to accept your packages. But we've seen that holding steady, at least on the paper side, as we look at how the waste system is changing. There's also been a lot of lightweighting in the waste industry, which is like even when they take that cap on a water bottle and make it just a little bit smaller, it's good for greenhouse gases in terms of shipping, but it does mean that those bottles are less weight. So when we're judging ourselves on tonnage, that might not always be the best measurement to look at. And so we are pushing hard to ensure that all of those materials we are getting. And so we've made it easier in terms of doing all rigid plastics, so that you don't have to look at the bottom and say, I don't know if the 1, the 2, the 3, the 4 actually is. If it's not like saran wrap, or a plastic bag, you can put it in the recycle bin, as long as it's rigid. It makes things a lot easier, just in general, a lot easier. And so there's some pretty closed loops in New York City. Obviously, the Pratt paper mill is a great class trip. You can actually more or less have the kids watch the paper go into the truck, get driven to the paper mill, and then watch the boxes come out the other end and head to local stores across the island. The other trip, this is going to push this, the other trip is our materials recovery facility in Brooklyn, which is owned, well, it's run by Sims Metal Management, but it has an education center in it, has class trips all the time, so you can talk about, here's all the things that glow in the blue bin, getting sorted, how are they sorted, what does that process look like, because I often find that when you make it so that people can visualize it, they're much more engaged. And so that's part of what we're working on. And then the new frontier has been organics, source separation of food and yard waste. There are a few residences on Staten Island who have that service now. We are at 1.6 million people citywide who have curbside service as of this week, and we are continuing to grow that program. Sometimes there's a bit of an ick factor, but we are finding that people are very engaged and super excited. I had one person tell me that they knew it was coming and they'd start freezing all of their food waste in anticipation. I was like, okay, you're a garbage groupie. But people feel very emotional about it and want to make sure that they are doing what they can to make the planet better. And what we produce, and we produce here on Staten Island, compost from Staten Island residences, from the waste that you throw away, is a really high quality compost. So I don't know if anyone was, driving around on a particular Sunday when we told people we'd give it away for free at 9 a.m. Yeah, at 6 a.m. we had blocked the 440 from Fresh Kills all the way up to the Staten Island Expressway, and we were out of material within 2 hours. We had given away 15,000 60-pound bags of compost. We are going to do another one. This time we're going to have people get a reservation so that we have the material and everyone knows that they're going to get it. But we are finding that there's a huge demand across the city for the compost material that we're producing. We did have an issue in Brooklyn where someone said, I don't want that brown bin. I'm not going to separate it. He's like, I want that bag of compost. And I was like, we can't give you the bag if you don't give us the food. So this is also an opportunity. It's a completely biological process. It's all about putting together the carbon and the nitrogen in the right mix and really thinking about what that's going to do and what are the good bacteria that are going to be making it so that that decomposes and creates a really rich soil going forward. So another opportunity for the curriculum. And then we have one of the things that is true is while people have moved to their Kindles and their iPhones and their iPads, is that is actually a very fast growing portion of the waste stream is electronic waste. And it is not easy to recycle. And it is not easy, it really should not go to waste to energy facilities or to landfills because there are a lot of toxics in it. So on Staten Island, we have a curbside collection to make it easy to get rid of electronic waste. And we will come and pick it up after you make an appointment and ensure that it gets recycled properly and doesn't get mixed with any of the other material. We're going to expand that program to some of the other boroughs because while most people want to do the right thing, they're really trying to do the right thing, drop-off programs tend to not have a lot of uptake. So even when you have a place to drop it off, people really sometimes, convenience matters. And so it's about the education, but it's about making it easy for people to do the right thing. So I'm going to wrap up here and invite the borough president to come up. But this is a really exciting time at the Department of Sanitation. We're having a lot of fun. Who knew that I would get to work with like the film industry and the fashion industry when I took this job? So making interesting connections because waste touches everyone across the city. So thank you very much.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here. I just want to say to you that, and this is something I've said publicly on many occasions and said privately to the mayor, his selection of Catherine Garcia was a wonderful one, and I think Commissioner Garcia is the best commissioner in the de Blasio administration. As you guys have heard me and other elected officials say over the years, sometimes it's a struggle to get attention to issues, and that's never the case with Commissioner Garcia. She's not from Staten Island, but she's treated Staten Island really well, and she's doing a fantastic job. If every commissioner were as good as Commissioner Garcia, I might have a few more hair on my head, or at the very least, it wouldn't be as gray as it is. Let me also start by saying thank you to you for what you guys do every day. I, too, am in a profession where you don't hear the words thank you as often, perhaps, as you should. So I appreciate what you guys do every day and what you go through. Congratulations on another successful year. I want to thank you also for being part of this growing team, because we need allies. And I want to tell you about a battle that our office has been in since I got into Borough Hall. Actually, before I started it, when I was in the last few years in the council. But I want to take you back to 1973 to tell you and this is a weird way to get to where I'm going, but just bear with me. In 1973, I was 7, and my dad came home with a fire engine red CJ5 Jeep. And I was in love immediately. And you could take the top off, you could take the sides off, and you would bounce around, and I loved it. But my mom didn't love it. And the Jeep lasted for 6 months, and she made my dad trade it in for a white, gaudy-looking Monte Carlo. And I love that Jeep, as I wiped a tear from my eye. And in 2002, my father was sick, and he had just lost his right leg, and he was still in the hospital. And I had this trip planned to go to Florida for spring training, and I didn't want to go. And he's like, go. And so I ended up going. And what did I see? I had all this guilt that I was in Florida, my father was in the hospital. What did I see all over Siesta Key was a Jeep and a Jeep and a Jeep and a Jeep. And I said, shit, I'm getting myself a Jeep. And I came home and I rented a Jeep, and I had that Jeep until last year. When I finally traded it in for a new Jeep, it was 13 years old at the time. I'm going on way too long about this story about the Jeep. But anyway, I love the Jeep, and I love the fact that it was bouncy. And I would use the Jeep to measure just how awful Staten Island's roads were. And I would obsess on it. And as you know, and I hope you have felt the difference, thanks really in large measure to the mayor hearing us and allocating a tremendous amount of money. We've paid more roads this year, more lane miles this year than the previous year, which we set a record, and we're going to set another record next year. So I am less obsessive as I drive Staten Island about the roads. And now I've taken my kind of OCD personality, and I focus on looking to my right and to my left at the filth and the litter that is Staten Island. When we got to Borough Hall in 2014, I said to my staff, I want to up our game in our anti-litter crusade. Now, if you've read the Staten Island Advance for the last 20 years, if you've listened to local elected officials, if you've paid attention at all, you know that we like to blame the mayor, the governor, the MTA, the Port Authority, people from New Jersey, Boston Red Sox fans. If there's a problem, we have a finger to point at the problem. This one is absolutely on us. This isn't people in SUVs coming from Pennsylvania, although they might litter too. This is Staten Islanders, and I know you have all been in a car, behind a car, and you've watched the window go down and the White Castle go out the window. You look at any turn on Staten Island, you look at any place where you have to stop, and you look to the side. We just cleaned, in conjunction with the Parks Department, Toad Hill Road. It was pristine 2 weeks ago. Look at how many Dunkin' Donuts containers there are. This is a mindset. This is a mentality. And what I said to my staff is this is a campaign without an exit strategy. It's graffiti all over again. They graffiti, they tag a wall, you go, you clean it. They're going to tag it again, and you clean it. They're going to tag it again, and we're going to keep doing it. And the first part of this fight is going to be years in the making, and it is intended to change the mentality. You have to make Staten Islanders understand that we don't have to. This isn't normal. This isn't an everyday part of our lives. It shouldn't be. It doesn't have to be. So we have done a lot of different things. We've done a PSA campaign where actually a student from Staten Island Tech won. We've done a poster campaign with famous Staten Islanders like Teddy Atlas, the editor of the Advance, Brian Leyline, Rich and Lois, a coach, and their dog Lorenzo were featured in it. And one last reminder as you walk out of stores, not to be that guy. We've done programs with small businesses, Operation Cleanup, where we've actually literally bought them the broom and the little dust collector thingy. We have a wonderful partner with Commissioner Garcia, where she has now started or is implementing bringing back what my father's father was, and that was a street sweeper, where you have sanitation workers who will actually be on litter patrol going and cleaning. We have a program on Father's Day. It's called Own the 18. We're doing it on Father's Day because it falls on June 18th, so we're doing the entire weekend. We're reminding Staten Islanders, property owners, whether you're a business owner or you're a homeowner, the law is you have to clean your sidewalk and into the street 18 inches every day. Theoretically, Commissioner Garcia can have her personnel come and find businesses. We don't want to lead with the summons book. I drive, again, in my Jeep, and I'm looking. I can tell how old a litter is. I can tell if a guy has been out there trying to clean it. There are lots of businesses on Staten Island that have not attempted to clean their sidewalks. So what we're trying to do is say one weekend, we're all going to volunteer. We're all going to take care of our own little area to just sort of get more Staten Islanders into this fight. This is a long-winded way, a very long-winded way of saying thank you for being part of this curriculum, so that as we are removing more litter from the streets of Staten Island, there's an effort underway to stop the next generation from becoming the slobs that too many of their parents have become. And that is the plain truth. There are too many Staten Islanders who do not give a damn. We had been undertaking various anti-litter efforts. We're at Staten Island Yankees game with Miles and Hank, and they said, do you know about ISRI and the Jason Learning program? And we did not. And they said, this is a curriculum to teach students about recycling, how to appreciate the environment. We think this works really well with your anti-litter efforts, and that's how we started. I want to thank everybody at Pratt for and ISRI and Jason Learning, and obviously Rose Kerr, the legendary former principal Rose Kerr, as she is now known, for all of these efforts. We need allies. This is one of Staten Island's challenges that we really shouldn't have. Again, we do this to ourselves, and even though perhaps everybody in this room is not the cause of the problem, you have to be part of the solution. There are a lot of really good Staten Islanders out there who have to be part of the solution. Just to tell you who is littering, and I've told the story a million times, it's the God's honest truth. It's the Friday before Memorial Day in my first year at Borough Hall. It's 6:30, 6:45. I'm coming back from the office. I'm heading on Highland Boulevard right before you get to the overpass. I come over the overpass. On your right-hand side is the back of Brady's Pond. And as you go on Highland into, is it Highland or is it Steuben at that point? It's probably Steuben. There is a woman younger than me, but not a kid, I don't know, in her 20s, 30s, professionally dressed, and she had a tall, white cup. And without thinking twice, I was in the middle lane, as I say, thank God, because I would have been in the front page of the Advance. And by the way, they have that story already printed. They just going to, they leave some of the dates out. Otto goes nuts. It's just... They just have to fill in like the date and exactly the fact. But thank God I was in the middle lane because I couldn't get to the right because I would have said things I probably would regret. But she was walking up, and without it, she took a sip, and without thinking twice, whoop, reverse sky hook, and they went doot, 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 right into the weeds. So here is, by all accounts, by physical appearance, good Staten Islander, professional of some sort, did not think twice, no hesitation, just flung it. And so the true folks who don't give a damn at all, we're probably not going to get to them. But there are too many other people who are littering, who, by all outward appearances, are quote-unquote good Staten Islanders. We have to put the seed in their mind. Just leave the crap in your car, take it home, and then put it in the garbage. And as we're doing that, again, it's up to educators to take these wonderful young minds that you mold every day and instill in them these long-term values. And when they appreciate the environment, when they understand the value of recycling, they are going to be less inclined to litter. So thank you for being here today. Thank you for taking on yet another challenge in your school day.
Here's what I'm going to talk about today. They've asked me, Jason, Amy, and Dee, and the people from Jason put the agenda together. They asked me to speak about trends in the recycling industry. One of the first trends I'm talking about here, one of the trends in the recycling industry is called recycling rate aspirations. I call it recycling rate itis, recycling rate envy, or whatever. There's a myriad of topics. But all of a sudden, when recycling got hot, communities and municipalities and cities and companies, whether it's General Motors or Walmart or whatever, they all have chief sustainability officers, people who, are responsible for making sure that we don't send stuff to the landfill avoidance, because landfills are bad, right? So all of a sudden, there's all these recycling rate aspirations. And there's a great quote in the industry: all recycling rate aspirations end in a 0 or a 5. What does that mean? 60% recycling rate by 2030, 90%, and I'm sure I want to steal the commissioner's thunder, but the city of New York's done a nice job too. They have this 0 landfill goal and all this other stuff, but this is something that's a trend that's going on in the country, whether it's a municipality, a state, and it's very, very, very aspirational. Okay, it's difficult to get there, but it's very aspirational. There's another reason for it, because people have figured out that trash costs a lot of money. It costs a lot of money to send the trash from New York to landfills. This landfill right around the corner here that you can probably see from the roof of this building is closed, right? So it's an avoidance of cost for cities if they don't have to send stuff to the landfill. And it also generates revenue, because guess what? These old cardboard boxes and old water bottles and stuff like that, they're worth money. Right? So if you collect a lot of them, you can sell them. So it is cost avoidance as well as generating revenues. It's politically popular. Anybody know what NIMBY is? Not in my backyard. Nobody wants a landfill in their backyard. There was a survey done about 6 or 7 years ago with all these things listed as to which things would you not want in your town. Landfills came out as the #1 thing that people didn't want in their town. #2 was prisons. People would rather have a correctional facility in their backyard than they would a landfill. Okay? So it's very politically popular. Commercial recycling outperforms residential by more than 2 to 1. And not in small businesses, I'll get to that later, but in large businesses. So you have a Walmart store. Walmart is very, very big on their sustainability goals. They have an 85.1% recycling rate in Walmart. That means of all the stuff that's considered quote unquote waste, 85.1% of it is recycled. And 100 minus 85.1, a bunch of teachers, anybody? 14.9? 14.9? 14.9% of it goes to the landfill. So they do a pretty good job. We, Pratt, work with a lot of companies. We have 2 Nissan automobile plants that we work with, Mississippi and Tennessee. We have 2 Nissan plants we work with, and we have several other companies that we work with that are at 0 landfill. Nothing goes to the landfill. We recycle everything for them. And if it can't be recycled, it goes to composting or it goes to waste to energy, but nothing goes to the landfill. And that is Nissan's largest manufacturing plant in the world, and we have them at zero landfill. Pratt has worked with them to do that. So commercial outperforms residential right now by more than 2 to 1, and there's really no standardized methodology for measuring recycling rates. That's a whole thing that I won't get into today, but there's a lot of organizations working on standardization of things in terms of measuring recycling rates. This is just a chart about recycling rates. This does not include organics, just paper, plastic, metal, and glass right here. And there's lots of different organizations. The EPA is the one that people most use, but most people feel the EPA numbers are a little bit off. They have a different methodology for calculating the numbers. They estimate the amount of what they estimate goes to the landfill is about somewhere around half of what really goes to the landfill. But back to my last slide about national, commercial, industrial versus residential, and a sort of 2 to 1 thing. Again, excluding organics, and organics are important because yard waste is most communities consider yard waste as part of organics. Obviously in New York you have less tree limbs and grass and clippings and leaves and stuff like that than you might have in Westchester County, right, or New Jersey. So commercial industrial is at about a 31% recycling rate. Residential nationally is at about a 14% recycling rate for a blended on 24%, again, excluding organics kind of thing. The biggest thing these days, the last several years, is some challenges in residential recycling, and there's challenges in commercial too. I'll talk about a couple of them in a minute. But the biggest thing, you can't pick up a recycling magazine or anything these days without issues regarding contamination, which is one of the reasons why the Jason Learning Curriculum is so good, because we got to teach kids when they're young. And they're the ones who teach the parents, right? No, you can't put a garden hose in with your recyclables kind of thing. You think it's recyclable, it's not. No, you shouldn't put a toaster oven in with your newspaper or your plastic. Yes, can you recycle that? Sure, it can go somewhere. But the Jason curriculum handles some of this stuff to make sure, because all this this stuff ends up going to the landfill anyhow. It just takes a longer trip to get there. And it costs money. It just costs more money.
5 cents. 5 cents. 10 cents. My name is Ryan Hickman. I am 7 years old, and I'm the president of Lions Recycling Company. I've been recycling since I was 3.5 years old. I get my recycling from my neighbors and my customers. Oh, thank you. I recycled 200,000 cans and bottles. I made about $21,000. My parents want me to save my money for college, but I want to save it for a garbage truck. Starting your own business is not that hard. I could barely hold it. What I'm doing keeps bottles and cans out of the ocean. That helps the environment. I think more young people like me should start recycling. If you are recycling, just keep up the good work.
Okay, another trend I talked about, commercial recycling is a tale of two cities. I mentioned in one of my first slides, commercial recycling rates outpace residential recycling rates, but it's not all good news. It's not all great news in commercial either. The big, large box stores and distribution centers, you know, I mentioned to you Nissan, we worked with them to get them at zero landfill. Nothing goes to landfill, largest automobile manufacturing plant of theirs in the world in Mississippi. And we work with Amazon, and Walmart has this 85.1% recycling rate that I mentioned earlier. You're a big box store, and your Walmart, you generate 3 tons of old cardboard in each Walmart store, every Walmart store per day. Per day. So every week there's a trailer load of baled cardboard leaving Walmart. So these big retail box stores, big distribution centers like Amazon, have somewhere, they don't have on average a 90% recycling rate, but there's a lot of them. General Motors is up to something like 20 some plants now that are zero landfill. Nothing goes to the landfill kind of thing. So it's a whole different paradigm than residential. Residential has different challenges. But when you get to, and this is particularly in a place like New York City, you get to, your local Starbucks store, McDonald's, your little corner deli, and guess what? They have, 10 pounds of cardboard boxes at the end of the day. What do they do with them, kind of thing? In some places they get recycled, in other places they don't. This is a bit of a challenge, and I know Department of Sanitation, I know that these are things that they're working on, but it is a tale of two cities in the country. Magazines have all but gone away. Books, right? You're reading them on your iPad and your, Amazon Fire or whatever they call that thing, and, and Kindle and whatever. My wife uses her iPad. She swore she would never go to that. She swore she would never do it. I gotta hold the book. I gotta hold the book. She went to this, she was in a book club, went to lunch with these 6 other ladies. Every one of them had their books on their iPad. She came home, I need an iPad for my, so now she reads all her books on her iPad. So this is, guess what? This is not coming back. There may be people who disagree with me, and I may be wrong. I don't think newspapers and magazines are coming back. Many cities struggle with issues around glass. It's something we're very, very involved in. We have a lot of material recovery facilities around the country. We process a lot of glass. We take a lot of glass. But there's a lot of good things going on with glass. And I won't get into the details of glass, but last year the Glass Recycling Coalition was formed for the first time, a group of recyclers. And Pratt was one of the founding members that says, we need to solve this issue. And guess who we have at the table? We have Diageo. Anybody know who Diageo is? Anybody ever heard of Crown Royal or Smirnoff? Or Guinness beer, okay? So we have Diageo at the table with us. We have Heineken at the table with us. Coors, Miller Lite, and they're all involved in the Glass Recycling Coalition, as well as about 5 other recycling companies, in addition to Pratt, and a couple of other trade organizations, the Glass Packaging Institute, et cetera. There's new technologies being tested. We went to visit one last week that is not in this country. There's no implementation of it in the United States yet. And we actually took a little trip out of the country last week, not me personally, but somebody in our organization. And it turns glass recycling sort of on its head, upside down. Usually glass recycling, they want the pieces of glass to be bigger, because then you can get them to the furnace and make them. And this actually makes the glass smaller, and it actually may work. So that's promising. And then there's new business models being piloted. There's a company in Kansas City that started these drop-off centers all over the place, kind of thing. So there's a lot of things going on with glass, but many cities struggle, and recycling companies struggle with glass. Cardboard is growing at the curb. I mentioned that we make about 1 out of 5, roughly, Amazon boxes, and that's a good thing. But residential recycling has a lower recycling rate than commercial. So sometimes it doesn't get picked up, particularly cities. This is not an issue in New York City, I put here, probably is, and a little bit of an issue, but a lot of cities have these bins, which you don't have in New York, and if it doesn't fit in the bin, there's one driver truck. The truck has an automated arm, it picks up the container, and if it's not in the bin, it gets left for the garbage truck. So it's an issue that we're helping cities with around education. The city of Charlotte has come out with the thing, you must break down your boxes by 18 by 18 inches. I'm not sure that's the answer, but we are involved, and we're working with Amazon, and we're working with other companies on this. Vast growth in, does anybody know what an NGO is? Non-government organization. There's a lot of NGOs, and this is only a sampling of them. The Closed Loop Fund, Keep America Beautiful, Ameripen was American Packaging Environmental Network, ISRI, Jason Learning, a lot of organizations. I put in quotation marks, they want to help, and they're doing education, they're providing money to cities, and they're doing a lot of things to try to improve recycling rates. There's a lot of great stuff going on. The next video I'm going to play is Jason Learning sponsors a poster contest and a video contest with ISRI. And we get to judge the best posters and the best videos, and this next video was the winning video. I was at the ISRI National Convention the last week of April. About 5,000 people go there, and it was in New Orleans, and they're all recyclers for the most part. And this little boy, 12 years old, something like that, won the prize for the best video for recycling. Here it is. Don't get up and dance.
Last year, my dad sold an old car that was too expensive to fix. How do you recycle something like a car that was too big for the bin? My dad drove the car to a junkyard where they remove parts that are still good enough to reuse. The car may sit in the junkyard for a long time while parts are salvaged. The tires are removed and sent to a rubber recycling center. The fluids and hazardous materials are taken out, and since the engine in my dad's car was still working, it was probably taken out and resold. After all of the usable parts are removed, the rest of the car is then compacted to make it easier to move. It is then taken to a shredder where it is ripped into pieces. Large magnets are used to separate the usable iron and steel from the non-ferrous metals and other leftover stuff. The iron and steel are melted down and can be reused over and over again. It takes lots of work to recycle a car, but it's worth it. Recycling steel requires 60% less energy than producing steel from iron ore. That means we save energy it would take to mine the ore, and we don't have big piles of junk everywhere.
And then this little boy comes out with his dad with his little bow tie on to receive his award. It was one of the cutest things you've ever seen. And just, you know, we got to inspire our kids. And part of the Jason Learning curriculum talks about not only paper and plastic and things like that, but ferrous metal and non-ferrous metal and a lot of that kind of stuff. So it's teaching kids about really everything, not just the stuff that's at the curb, but stuff that we say there's this contest, it's too big for the bin. How do you handle things that are too big for the recycling bin? Okay, an old TV, electronics, etc. But the biggest wild card in the last slide that I have on this section in the recycling industry is this. It's what's going on in the export market. Roughly 40% of what's collected in recyclables in the US leaves this country. It's the largest export from this country is recycled paper. About 2,200 containers, those big seagoing containers that go out of Port Elizabeth or whatever it is, out of this country, about 2,200 containers a day leave with paper on it. And most of that, about 60% of that goes to China. So there's a lot of stuff going on. I'm not going to get into the details, but there's a lot of stuff going on that is impacting this. One of the biggest is China's self-sufficiency. 15 years ago, China collected domestically 15 million tons of paper, 1.5. Last year, they collected 50 million tons of paper. So they're not as dependent on Western Europe and the US anymore. So it's sort of a big issue. A little bit about Pratt. We are a family-held company. We're $2.5 billion. We're the largest family-held packaging company in the world. It's the Pratt family. There's a guy by the name of Anthony Pratt. You'll see his picture in a minute. We recycle 2.5 million tons of recycled materials a year. About 60% of that is paper, even though we're a paper company. We save about 40 million trees annually, 5th largest paper and packaging company in the US. For 100% recycled paper mills. And, you know, let's say there's 100 mills in the country that use recycled paper. We are the largest user of residential mixed paper. So we're a little different, and it's a technology thing. And our mills, our 4 mills, consume 10 million pounds of paper per day. And our mills run 361 days a year. We're closed 4 days for maintenance, downtime. We have 68 box factories in the US, and we have 17 recycling plants in the US, material recovery facilities. We're fully integrated. We have recycling plants. This is the barge from, there's the barge coming from 59th Street in New York over to our mill right down the street here in Staten Island off Victory Boulevard, 4435 Victory Boulevard. Is that the address, Hank? It goes into the mill. It makes these big jumbo rolls of paper. A few of you have been there. And we invite you all to the mill. Work through Richard, work through Rose, and we want to invite you all to the mill. We make big sheets out of those rolls of paper. They're made into boxes. Hopefully those boxes get recycled again, and then the cycle starts all over again. You can recycle a cardboard box about seven times. Okay? We make corrugated boxes. We make point-of-purchase displays. I'm just going to show you a couple here real quick. We made this box, made in Staten Island, the pizza and a box. So, you know, the newspapers that are put on the curb or that's recycled in your school. And then it got made into new paper, and then we made this box out of it. We had an event a few years ago at a pizzeria somewhere in Staten Island with Borough President Otto and Commissioner Garcia. We make every box for Home Depot moving and storage box in the country, all 2,200 stores. You go into Home Depot to buy a box, it's our box. And they buy millions of boxes, not like per year, like per week. You can imagine 2,200 stores and all the people who move their kids in and out of college and put stuff in their attic, in their basement, et cetera. Okay, so that's what we do. Here's our customers. The U.S. Post Office, flat rate shipping boxes, if it fits, it ships. We make all of those. And these are just some of our customers. Real quickly, finishing up Pratt in New York City. That's the barge that comes from 59th Street, Department of Sanitation Marine Transfer Station. About 4 years ago, we hit a milestone at the paper mill. We hit a mark of making 5 million tons of paper. Mayor Bloomberg came, did a proclamation. And there's Anthony Pratt with Mayor Bloomberg in the background there. And people say, really, a paper mill in New York City? Most paper mills are in Maine, Wisconsin, Canada, you know, Washington State, Oregon. Why are they there? Trees and water. We use 2/3 less water per ton of paper, and we use 0 trees. It's all 100% recycled. So when you talk about a mill in New York City, when I went to the ISRI convention in New Orleans, people talk about, not people at Pratt, the industry talks about, you know, Pratt's mill in New York City. It's a big deal because there's not a paper mill in Chicago. There's one paper mill outside LA that's a really tiny paper mill, about 10% of the size of this paper mill. Mills are not in major cities. Only paper mill, obviously, in New York. It's 100% recycled. We need 2.5 million pounds of paper per day. That's why we need you guys as teachers. A significant part comes from Department of Sanitation. We've now produced 6 million tons. I said it was 5 million tons a few years ago. It saved 102 million trees. It's a huge New York City circular economy, economic engine. And we have a box factory here that makes the boxes. We procure for this mill 2.5 million pounds of paper per day, as I mentioned. 295 direct jobs, about 600 indirect jobs. All the welders and the plumbers and the electricians and the repair and maintenance people and you know, all of that stuff is just a lot of indirect employees, a lot of trucking. And we spend about $100 million per year in wages and salaries, repairs and maintenance, et cetera. So it's a pretty big economic engine. 102 million trees, how big is that? It's an entire forest, about 8 times the size of Staten Island. That's how many trees we've saved since we've been in operation there. And finally, a lot of environmental benefits. Every Statistic you're maybe going to hear from Jason, for every ton of paper you recycle versus cutting down a tree, you save 17 trees. So we use 1,000 tons a day. We make 1,000 tons a day. We save, just in this mill on Victory Boulevard, 17,000 trees a day saved. 7 million gallons of water, et cetera. You can see the other statistics. I don't need to read them to you. So thank you very much. As I mentioned, as my starting slide, this was it. Borough President Otto, Commissioner Garcia, thank you so much for coming. This means a lot to myself and all of these folks. But this is one of the biggest, what I mentioned to them earlier, one of the biggest public-private partnerships, probably the biggest public-private partnership for recycling education in the country. And it started with the borough president and with this anti-litter campaign. And we had a big meeting in his office with Jason Learning, Department of Sanitation, ISRI, Bob Ensinger, head of communications and head of the Jason Learning program at ISRI. The Jason people came from Mystic, Connecticut, the Department of Education, and all of these people, and quite frankly, there's even more organizations. Grow NYC was in that meeting, and that's, I think, sort of an extension of Department of Sanitation, or works closely with Department of Sanitation. They have a program called Recycling Champions, and some of you may have it in your schools. It started with a handful of schools. So thank you very much. Thank you for investing the time.
We now join a recycling training workshop for elementary and intermediate school teachers, which is being given by Amy O'Neill, Director of Education and Professional Development for Jason Learning.
So Jason Learning began in the 1980s. We're just about 30 years old almost, coming up on our 30th anniversary. And we have basically built curriculum around positive STEM role models. So all of our curriculum, it's pretty classic middle school curriculum, can be leveled up and down in some cases, but it's anything from weather to climate change to energy to forces in motion to life sciences, ecology, wetlands. So we pretty much do your classic science school content, and when presented with the opportunity to partner with ISRI and develop a curriculum around recycling, we said, awesome, yes, we would love to. And during the day, both Dee and I will take maybe about 10 minutes just to show you the Jason website. Most of the resources, most of the curriculum is available online. There are some really engaging digital simulations, as well as videos, photo galleries. It's a fairly complex digital platform.
So what you're going to get today, we have a couple of goals in mind. What you're really going to get today is a very quick overview. We're going to do like the crash course. We're going to do really brief snapshots of as many activities as we can possibly cram in the time allotted. How many of you have ever made paper before? Okay, some of you have made paper. Okay, well, we're going to do a really quick all-group demo this morning. You guys are going to take any random piece of paper you want, except for the big chart paper that's on your table. And you can pull one of these off, and you're just going to, either with your hand or with some scissors, just cut them up into little shreds, and you're going to pop them in. I'm going to come around, and you're literally going to, we're going to do this quick. Like this is the 20-second shred. Okay, making paper is pretty simple. You really need to start with about half of the blender full. So I'm going to remove some, but everybody's still in here. Okay, the next thing that you need to do is add warm or hot-ish water. You're supposed to let this sit for a while, but we're not. We're just going to go for it. Actually, maybe we'll give it a minute. Does anybody know why trees make paper so well? What's the property that's... Okay, so you can also talk about cellulose being basically a property of excuse me, I was going to say chemical. But cellulose is really a material that is very hard to break down. And we all know that, but they may not know that. You can also get some really cool pictures of the structure of cellulose if you Google the images. And what's really cool about cellulose is you think about all of the things that are in the recycling stream, and some of the materials are only good after X number of turns or generations that they've been recycled. Paper is one of the best success stories because you can literally recycle it over and over and over and over again because of cellulose, because how strong it is, and the bonds between those molecules. So the really cool thing is that although we can't digest it, it lasts for so long, and that's why it is such a successful story. Woo! Everybody okay? Okay, and you don't really have to do it that long. As you can see, there's a lot of pulp in here. So this is what it looks like. Then you just need a bin. You can basically do this in any size bin. The trick with this is that you just need to make sure that you've got some frames that can fit inside the bin. Now you could actually buy what's called a frame and decal. You could actually buy a real paper making kit. You could go to AC Moore, you could go to Michael's, and it's going to look a little different than this. We're sort of like the low-tech solution. So we're just going to dump this stuff right in here. All right, so now you're supposed to add a little bit of liquid starch. You can also make your own liquid starch. You can just add a little bit of starch, a little bit of liquid starch to this solution when you've got the pulp all ready to go. Do I have somebody who wants to kind of get down and dirty and give this a try? She would love to. Awesome, okay. So we're using the small one because obviously the tub is pretty tiny. I'm just going to push the backing of the frames down so it doesn't catch you. And we're doing this, I call this the poor man's version. You're literally going to just dip it in, and we're going to try to capture some of the pulp right on the top there. Okay. Okay, you ready? Okay, here you go. And I'll hold this. I'll kind of tilt it. And you can just put it right, put it right down in there. Let's get some more. You want to get some more? See if we can do that. Ready? Yeah, look at that. Okay, awesome. Okay, so now, ideally, what the decal does in this case, I don't know if everybody can see. If you need to if you're in the back, if you want to stand, be our guest. But what the decal does, it just adds a little bit more support to it because it gets really flexible, so the screen tends to kind of bulge down. But you can do this with a lot of things. You can press it with your hands. You can you can use a sponge. Actually, the instructions tell you to use a sponge. Okay, so.
It looks like oatmeal.
It does. Okay, you're gonna hang on to that for just a second. So there's a couple of things you can use. You can use, we just cut boards that look like this. You don't have to. You can also, what we usually do is we'll lay a towel like this down on it. Then you can also put newspaper down, or wax paper works, a piece of felt. You can even just use a regular piece of paper if you want. So that's what we'll do. And then, literally, we're going to remove the first frame. So I'll take this off. And then just flip it over. And you're going to pop it right on here. Awesome. Okay. So now, it's still pretty wet. It's still pretty bulky. So you basically sandwich this. So you take another piece of paper, or wax paper, whatever you want to do. You can take another towel, The newspaper is kind of nice because actually the newspaper does have some absorbent qualities to it. And then you just sandwich it and you pop another. Go ahead. Thanks. Of course. You pop another thing down like this. And again, you can use sponges. And I'm dripping all over the floor, which I'm sure the country club isn't happy about. And you can walk on it. Usually that's what we do. We'll just walk on it. We'll stand on it. Okay, when you're done, it might look like this. This was from newspaper. Hence, you have a little gray, kind of greenish tone in there. And it does matter what paper you use because it'll end up being a similar color. And I'm going to show you where you're going to access some fact sheets that will help your students continue this research. So the idea is that they're going to get their initial ideas on paper. So they're kind of making a model, they're translating basically a mental model of what they think might be happening to close this loop on paper. To access the actual resources that are going to help the students move through this, you can actually go to jason.org. You're going to tap on curriculum. And if you go to the curriculum units or the curriculum overview, it doesn't really matter, whichever one you click on. Here they are. And we scroll down all the way to the end, almost all the way to the end. And you'll see this icon here with the image, Recycling Activities Collection. You click on that. Okay, and as I mentioned before, the Jason project was always based on positive scientist STEM role models that could really engage kids. You'll see that there are some featured champions of recycling. So there are some scientists that are showcased, and actually they're not all scientists. They might be actually other career-oriented folks that are in this industry in some way, shape, or form. They might be in the marketing division. They might be part of the engineering piece of it. So they're kind of a wide variety of folks that work in that industry. But if you scroll all the way down, notice that you have some classroom posters that you can print out, and actually you were given a few in the back of your binder. And then you go down to below, and here are the actual lessons. So you can, we just did an invitation to recycling, which is in the K through 4. Right now we're doing mapping scrap, which is in grades 5 through 8. We lump K through 8 together in this particular workshop because there's a lot that you can adapt up and down. And it seems to be a nice combination. You do not need a license for the public face of the website. So what I'm showing you right now is totally free for everybody, for anyone. We're going to change modes. We're going to move on to metals. The scrap metal industry is huge, and kids can go and investigate that. You know, what happens, going back to the mapping the scrap, what happens to steel, what happens to iron, what happens to aluminum. And they start to understand or see in a different way that full circle loop. And translating that, when they see that it's actually going somewhere, that there isn't just like a bin and then magically it just sort of disappears without really having an understanding of really what's happening to those items. There's not really ownership of, oh yeah, I am really going to recycle, but I think once that recognition is there of what's really happening to those items, becomes real for them. Other things that you can point out with this is to mine this stuff from scratch. There are a lot of environmental effects from that.